Something shifts in a narcissist's behavior when they're afraid of you, and because they cannot acknowledge fear, not to you, not to themselves, it doesn't come labeled as what it is. It looks like anger that doesn't match what happened, or a level of attention that directly contradicts the indifference they've been performing, or a sudden disorienting softness. A version of them you've never quite seen before, arriving at exactly the wrong moment to trust. If you've been close to someone like this, you've felt these shifts without knowing what to call them. Carl Jung's framework doesn't offer a weapon for that. It offers a map. And what you find, when you use it, is that each of these behaviors is a structural response, not random, not personal in the way it feels, but the predictable output of an interior arrangement that cannot afford to lose control of you. Stay with me here. There are 5 of them. The first sign is that they escalate when you don't react. The most common version looks like disproportionate anger. You say something measured, or you say nothing at all, and the response comes back significantly larger than anything that could explain it. In the 9th volume of his collected works, Ion, Jung wrote about shadow projection. The shadow, as he defined it, is the repository for everything the psyche has labeled unacceptable. The inadequacy, the need, the vulnerability, the failure that cannot be allowed into conscious awareness. One of the primary ways it gets managed is by projecting it outward, locating it in other people, seeing in others what we've refused to see in ourselves. For a narcissist, this projection isn't occasional, it's structural. Their sense of self depends on locating certain qualities, weakness, wrongness, deficit, in the people around them. And the mechanism doesn't work in empty air. It needs a recipient who absorbs it, who responds, who by responding confirms the narcissist's framing of what's happening. When you don't react, when you receive the escalation with a steadiness that gives nothing back, the projection has nowhere to go. It returns. And what follows isn't anger in any ordinary sense. It's panic reorganized into a form the ego can tolerate. You stopped being absorbent. And for this particular psychology, that is genuinely threatening. The second sign is that they start managing how other people see you. This one is subtler, and it tends to arrive after the escalation hasn't worked. Comments to mutual connections, triangulation, a version of you, diminished, unreliable, unstable, that gets quietly distributed to people who haven't spoken to you directly in a while. In Volume 7 of the collected works, 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung described the persona as a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. For most people, it's relatively flexible. A role put on in certain contexts and removed in others. For someone with a narcissistic structure, the persona has fused to the ego. The mask isn't something they wear. It's who they've decided they are. When you've seen behind that construction, when you know something they cannot control you knowing, they extend the management outward. The effort to edit your reputation isn't about destroying you. It's about restoring the narrative, making sure the version of you that people encounter is one that keeps their version intact. It's the structural panic of an ego whose story is no longer entirely in its own hands. The third sign is that they monitor you more closely than their indifference suggests. This one tends to disorient people most, particularly if they've been told, or have told themselves, that the relationship is essentially finished. The narcissist, who has been performing detachment, somehow knows too much about a conversation you had, a change you made quietly, a direction you started moving in without announcing it. The surveillance is the tell. Someone who has genuinely moved on doesn't track. What's happening is that your continued existence in their orbit carries ongoing risk. You hold the materials of an unfinished projection, the parts of themselves they deposited in you that you've stopped confirming. Jung would have described what keeps them returning as the behavior of an autonomous complex, an unconscious cluster of psychic material that keeps circling what it needs to resolve, regardless of what the conscious mind claims to want. You've become something the psyche returns to not because of anything you're actively doing, because the account isn't closed. I saw a version of this in my last year at the hospice. There was a family I worked with for several months. A man in his late 60s who had made himself the center of every decision about his wife's care. Every preference she expressed got translated through him. Every medical question was filtered through his interpretation of what she needed. There was an afternoon when she had a window of unusual clarity. Some patients get this near the end, a brief period of being entirely present, entirely themselves. She began speaking directly to the nurses, to her daughters, to me, what she wanted, what she didn't want, what she needed the last part to look like. Something shifted in the room. This man, who had been immovable in every prior conversation, became suddenly cooperative, agreeable, strangely conciliatory toward a medical team he'd been fighting for months. I thought something had reached him, that her clarity had softened something real. Walking through the Blue Ridge the following week, I understood it differently. She had simply become uncontrollable, too clear, too direct. There was no way to manage the situation when the person at the center of it was speaking plainly for herself. Without the ability to manage, the only remaining option was compliance. The cooperation was fear reorganizing itself into whatever could still function. The fourth sign is that they try to preempt the person you're becoming. This one is easy to miss in real time. You start changing, not announcing it, just doing it, going quieter, holding more of your own space, setting a limit without defending it with a long explanation, nothing dramatic. The shift is interior, still forming, and before you've said a word about any of it, there's a move. An accusation that doesn't quite fit anything recent. A provocation that arrives at a strange angle. A moment of attention that feels slightly off, coming from slightly the wrong direction. The timing is the signal. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates before the conscious mind has caught up with what it's detected. A psyche organized around maintaining influence can sense the early motion of your autonomy, the shift in the quality of your attention, the slight adjustment in your posture, the way you've stopped explaining yourself, before you've made any of it visible in a concrete way. This isn't intuition in any admirable sense. It's a threat detection system, calibrated specifically to sense loss of control. When it fires early, before you've changed anything overt, before anything has been said, it means the system is still running, still watching, even when they claim to have moved on. The preemptive move is the tell that they haven't. The fifth sign is that they offer something they've never offered before. This is the most disorienting of the five, and the one most often misread. After a period of escalation or distance, something changes. They become available in ways they weren't. They remember things they never used to remember. They say something vulnerable that genuinely surprises you. They ask questions they've never asked before. It reads, at first, like growth. Like the version of them you always hoped existed has finally found its way to the surface. Jung wrote about what he called the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche to hold two opposing forces, in tension long enough for something genuinely new to emerge. When that process is real, you can feel its weight. Genuine integration is slow. It produces change that has texture and cost, something that couldn't have been performed because it required too much to arrive. What the frightened narcissist offers is different. It's difficult to articulate, but not impossible to sense. Control through dominance stopped working. Control through intimacy is the next available mechanism. The vulnerability present in the offer is real, in the sense that genuine distress is underneath it. But the structure of what's happening isn't integration. It's negotiation. They're offering what they've assessed you need in exchange for something that remains fundamentally transactional. You'll feel the difference if you don't rush past it. The new thing arrives too quickly. It doesn't quite land in the right place. And underneath whatever warmth you feel toward it, there's the familiar sense that something is still being managed. Jung had a specific way of describing what makes someone genuinely threatening to an ego organized around control. Not aggression, not confrontation. Clarity. The inflated ego, the one that has arranged itself around a grandiose story, that has located its deficits in others, that requires a particular arrangement of the people around it to remain stable, is most threatened by someone who sees through the story without requiring it to change, who remains steady, who doesn't take on the role they've been assigned, who knows what they're looking at and doesn't flinch and doesn't attack. A 2025 study published in the Sage Journals found that narcissistic individuals, both grandiose and vulnerable types, show significantly elevated physiological stress responses under conditions of social evaluation. The threat of being seen clearly by someone who won't look away and won't reframe what they're seeing registers as genuine danger in the nervous system, not just discomfort, a real threat response. That's not a power you have to build or acquire. It's what remains when you stop hiding from what you already know. The 5 signs I've described aren't evidence that you've done something wrong. They're evidence that something in the person across from you recognized that you couldn't be entirely absorbed into their version of reality. And in a psyche organized around that absorption, being unabsorbable reads as threat. You didn't cause that. You just stopped disappearing.